What were some of your favorite projects that you guys worked on?
Well, first let me talk about a product itself
Sure.
that we did do. During my ownership at Lionel, I bought a T1 locomotive, a big real one, and we took it off to Maryland to do the restoration on it, and we got it running, up and running, and that was a real experience. But I really fell in love with that T1 locomotive. So I came back and talked to our engineers, and I said, guys, can we produce that in the plant? They said, sure, why not? So we did. And you'll see one of those engine intenders on the shelf in here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was an experience that was very close to my heart. The one thing when I bought Lionel, there were several things I was concerned about. Number one, I didn't think we were putting the product out, the type of product that the public wanted. Number two, candidly, the quality of the product being produced was not there. Number three, they were not getting product out of the plant on time. Number four, the way they went about marketing, I wasn't a bit happy with. And so I said to myself, what would I like to do within the product line? Yeah, the things I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to that, I would like to expand into the electronic arena, which was in its infancy then.
Sure.
Barely even talked about. The electronics, the remote control systems, all of those things, sound systems, and this was a very memorable experience of getting to that point. And I knew we didn't have the engineering capability or design capability currently within Lionel at that time. So I looked for a company around that might have it, and I won't mention their name, but I talked to them. They came to Detroit and met with me. And when we were all done with the meeting, I was not quite happy with what we talked about there, the way they were going to go about it and approach it. So I sent them home. And about a year and a half later, I was continuing to think about this. And so at that time, they called me again. And they said, Dick, we'd like to come in and meet with you. I think maybe we have something now that would interest you. And I said, well, okay, you're more than welcome to come in. And they said, we have a guy named Neil Young who is becoming part of our company. And I said, who's that? And anyway, I said, fine, come on in. They came in. We spent a whole day talking about it. And they left.
Huh.
And I talked about it with our people, and again, I was unhappy with the direction it was taking with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just called them and told them, thanks for coming in, but we're not going to do anything with you. About a week later, I got a call from Neil Young. And Neil told me, he said, Dick, I liked our meeting. I think you're on target. I'd like to get together with you, and I'm telling you now, I am not collaborated with the company. And can I come in and talk to you? And I said, sure. Neil came in, and we spent a whole day together. And we got our heads together. And he said, well, I'd like to buy into the Lionel company. I said, Neil, I'm sorry, none of it's for sale. But I'll tell you, we can create a new company called Lion Tech, if you will, and put that together with you as a 50% partner and myself as a 50% partner, and go to work on the development of the technologies that we all would like to see. And that was the kickoff to one of the major happenings within Lionel and during my career there.
It's amazing just sitting here thinking about the developments that Lionel and Lion Tech brought into the hobby, really from about 91 to about 95.
Right.
And here we are in 2014.
Yeah.
And those early technology developments were the building blocks for, these amazing things like the legacy system now.
Oh, yeah.
We're on Rail Sounds version 5, whatever. But we've gone from this really, what at the time was really groundbreaking technology.
Yeah.
And the fact that it happened on your watch, and here we are, 20 years later, and just to look back and see the history. And what started as a really simple conversation and a really unique brainstorming session between you and Neil has changed the face of how we play with our model trains. And it's neat to hear that story about how Lion Tech got started. And it's really neat that you guys were clearly, all the way back then thinking about, okay, how do we bring the technology into the trains? How do we make the trains more fun to play with? And, you talk about the T1. The T1 was one of the first large die-cast steam engines, and here we are again 20 years later where we have, full-size scale articulated big boys and Challengers and Alleghenies. And all of it started under your watch. That's something you have to be really proud of.
Yeah, I am. I'm proud of everything else that went on at Lionel with our team that we had finally put together. They were all hard-working, dedicated people and loved what they were doing. And that was an important part of my owning Lionel, along with the technologies that we put together,
That's very neat.
An interesting thing, Neil Young, you say the name today, most people knew who Neil was, but I didn't. But as I got to know Neil, I realized really what a great musician he was and still is. In fact, I just talked to Neil this morning on the telephone.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Are
we
you
had
two?
A nice conversation.
I was going to say, if you two are talking, you two have to be cooking up something interesting.
No, we're not. We're just good friends.
That's really neat.
But anyway, he's a composer. He knows electronics. And this was one of the main things that interested me in Neil, because I was convinced that he was on the starting floor of the electronic world, okay? Mm-hmm. Because of his music.
Sure.
All the recordings and everything he was doing there. He was not only a good piano player, organ player, guitar player, but he knew how to write good music.
Right.
And a little different kind of music than I was used to. And so anyway, life has been full of experiences like that, getting to know people, know who they are, what their talents are. And that was a great talent with our talent that we had at Lionel that we put together.
Yeah, and Neil today is still on the cutting edge of technology. If you look at some of the other projects he's actively involved in, the Linkvolt project is a big one that's near and dear to his heart. His new music player, we're talking about bringing high fidelity music in a portable music player. He's always been involved in these cutting edge technologies, and that still holds true today. And what a great partnership between Lionel and a guy that clearly appreciates being on the edge of things. Right. So it seems like it worked out well for everybody.
It did.
One of the other things I want to discuss, something that you probably haven't discussed in a long time, is your other big purchase while you were at Lionel, among other things. And that was the purchase of Madison Hardware and taking Madison Hardware and moving it to Detroit. Did you visit Madison often while you were growing into the hobby, or how did you come to find out about Madison?
Well, I knew about Madison, but I'd never really had any reason to go to New York. I knew they had a little storefront. What really happened was through conversation with other train collectors. And that conversation was, Dick, I don't know whether you know much about Madison Hardware, but have you ever thought about going in and talking to Lou and Carl? And I said, no. And they said, well, you should probably do that, because they're both getting up in age. And they really were. Mm-hmm. And apparently they wanted to divest themselves of the store before it was too late and it would just hang there in their estate to dispose of it. So I called and I talked to Carl in the store and told him I'd like to come in and talk to him. And he said, well, okay, come on in. Yes, I would like to talk to you about you buying the company. So I said, well, what I'd really like to do is send one of the guys that works for me in to do an overview and take some pictures of what is there, rather than me coming in and starting to do that myself and work from scratch.
And so was that Chuck Liebrock?
Chuck Liebrock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to make
That's
sure.
who it was.
I want to make sure I had my guy right.
You had him right.
Good.
And Chuck went in and spent a few days there and came back and he said, wow, they've got several locations there. They've got the store, they've got a little warehouse part behind the store and down the basement and another building down the street that has two big areas in it that has stuff. And he said, Dick, I can't do an inventory on it. I did. I looked at a few of the boxes that I could see. I mean, they were all piled sky high right up to the ceiling. And you couldn't tell what was in them. But he looked at some of them and he said, there is some nice stuff there. And maybe you want to come in and talk to him. And so I called Lou back. He said, yeah, come on in. So my wife and I went in, and we sat down and started talking to him. Carl was not there. He was home. He was not feeling good. His wife, now I'm really tapping my memory, but either she was very ill at that point or had just passed away.
Okay.
And so Carl was home, and I talked to Lou about the price, and his price was way too high, and I told him, well, look, I might just as well go back and get on a plane, because you're way out of line with what you're expecting to receive. He said, well, what would you offer? So I offered, gave him a low ball, and he said, no, you know I can't do it that low. So anyway, we bantered back and forth, and each time we came to talking about a number, he'd go to the phone and pick it up and call Carl. He'd come back and say, no, Carl says no. And so we finally arrived at a price, and I called again my banker in Detroit and told him how much money to wire to Carl. And we signed a quick agreement there saying that I had bought everything lock, stock, and barrel, which is what we did. But then we had to figure out how to get it back to Michigan. So we called a cartage company, it was semi-trailer. We spent 2 months hauling that stuff back to Detroit. And the end result was 16 semi-truckloads coming back to Detroit, loaded to the hilt. That's what was Madison Hardware. Nobody had any idea there'd be stuff like that.
This has been a Lionel Collectors Club of America production, where we are constantly striving to bring our members, friends, and fans the most updated information and communications for all things Lionel.